Okay, good morning, everyone. Unfortunately, I gave a shiur on Samach Vav Amud Beis, and I forgot to press record, and I realized in the middle of the shiur. So here we are, recording it from scratch. I'm Rav Yosef, so we're on 66b1, a few lines down, 66b1, a few lines down. I'm Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef says, Lo shmiya li hashmaita. I did not hear this statement of Shmuel that the residents of an inner chatzar are allowed to relinquish their right of passage to the outer chatzar, in the outer courtyard, in order to enable the people in the inner one, the back one, to be able to go through. The only way they're able to do so is by relinquishing their rights to people in the outer courtyard. He said, I never heard it. And remember, this is the tragic statement of Rav Yosef, where he, there's certain things which he forgot. He forgot much of his learning, and his student Abaye would oftentimes remind him. So Amarle Abaye says, At Amar Snealan, you told it to us. Vaha Amar Snealan, you said it about the following. Amar Shmuel said, Ein bittul reshus mechatz lechatzer. There is no relinquishment of rights from one courtyard to another courtyard. Ve'en bittul reshus bechorban. There is no relinquishment of rights in a ruin. We'll come back to this ruin thing in a moment. Amar Slan Allah, and you said about this first ruling, Ki Amar Shmuel ein bittul reshus mechatz lechatzer. When does Shmuel say that there is no relinquishment of rights from one courtyard to another? Lo Amran el shtei chatzeros ufesach echad b'neim. That's only when there are two courtyards side by side, and there's a door over here. Imagine my knuckles over here as a little door between them, but they both open in their own way to a street. That's where Shmuel said that you can't have the people over here go ahead and, if they didn't join the Eruv, they can't go ahead and be mivatel their reshus, relinquish their rights. The people over here, that can't be done. Aval zo lifnei mizu, but if it's one inner and one outer, there, mitoksha osrin zelzeh mivatlin. If you have a situation where you have an outer courtyard and an inner courtyard, the people in the inner courtyard forgot to make an Eruv. In that case, that not only impacts them, but it impacts the people in the outer courtyard, since the people in the inner courtyard have to walk through the outer courtyard, and since they are not all part of an Eruv, therefore they are going to cause the people in the outer courtyard to also not be able to carry, because there is a usage of the Eruv of their courtyard which is not combined through the Eruv. And therefore, in that particular case, Shmuel says, yes, side by side, where they don't really need each other, there we're not going to let this whole relinquishing of rights loophole leniency work. But over here, in this case, where the inner ones have to go to the outer ones, and the only way for them to get out and all of that, therefore we say, okay, we're going to be lenient and we'll allow the people in the inner ones to relinquish their rights to those in the outer ones. Amar le Rav Yosef says to Abaya, Ana amina mishmei de Shmuel hachi. Did I really say from the name of Shmuel? Amar Shmuel, didn't Shmuel say, Ein lanu be'eruvin elakil shom mishnasenu? When it comes to the rules of Eruvin, we have to follow the words of the Mishnah precisely. And it says in the Mishnah future, in a little bit, we'll be reading a Mishnah in a while, God willing, which talks about this whole idea of relinquishing rights. And there it says, Anshe Chatzer, velo Anshe Chatzeros. The Mishnah, which discusses the rules of relinquishing your rights, says the people of the Chatzer in the singular. It does not say the people of the Chatzeros, the plural. And therefore, it implies that you could only relinquish within one Chatzer. You can't do it from one courtyard to another. Amalei Abai says back to Rav Yosef, Ki Amraslan, Ein Lanu Be'eruvin El Koshem Mishnasenu, Aha Amraslan. You said it to us, you told us this idea of follow the text precisely, only about a very particular case, Shamavu Lechatzeros Kechatzer Levatzim, that the mavoi, the street, its relationship to the courtyard is the same relationship of courtyards to their houses. Okay, what exactly that means we'll come back to. Don't worry about it. But the point is that the Abai is saying to Rav Yosef, that principle you initially taught us was not a wide-ranging principle. It was about a very limited particular Mishnah. But in general, even though this Mishnah, which you're quoting, which talks about relinquishing of rights, talks about it in the singular, the same principle should be able to apply in the plural as well. Okay, that is the view of Shmuel as explained by Abaye, who he says Rav Yosef, his teacher, taught him. Okay, says the Gemara further. Gufa, it was taught earlier. Amar Shmuel says, Ein bittul reshus mechatz lechatzer ve'ein bittul reshus bechorva. Shmuel says that there is no relinquishment of rights from one courtyard to another courtyard. And again, the way Abai is interpreting that, we're talking about two courtyards side by side, and there is no bittul reshus, there's no relinquishing of rights in a ruin. In a ruin means, you and I, we live, the two of us live in a courtyard, but it's not a courtyard, it's actually ruins. It's like rubble and all that. And so it's not really a usable space. It's not a typically usable space, and so Shmuel says that there's no bittul reshus. In other words, if let's say, we forgot to make an Eruv that week, I could say, okay, I'm mivatel my rights. I relinquish my rights of usage to you, and therefore now it's considered like there's only one person using this place, and therefore in a courtyard that would work. In a ruin that wouldn't work. Why not? The way the commentators explain is that people don't typically live in ruins. And so maybe when the rabbis went ahead and they made this leniency, they did so in a typical scenario where you have a courtyard. Again, let's just, put ourselves in the minds of those living back in the day. Their houses were tiny, and they would, therefore, there are a lot of things they would do out in their courtyard. That was normal. And so they would have courtyards, and therefore you have these loopholes to ensure, these leniencies to ensure that people are going to have usage of their courtyards. But if you have ruins outside, that's something which people are not typically using because it's all full of rubble. You can't even use it for your bath and your this and your that, bath. I don't know, whatever things they do in their courtyard, they hang their laundry and all that stuff, not on Shabbos, but you know what I mean. So the point is that when it comes to them sharing ruins, you would not be able to do relinquishing of rights. That's the opinion of Shmuel. Rav Yochanan argues on both cases. Yesh bittul reshus mechaz lechatzer. There is relinquishing of rights from one courtyard to another. V'yesh bittul reshus bechurba, and there is relinquishing of rights in a ruin. And the Gemara now explains why they have to argue about both things. Why don't we just say, why don't they argue about one case and we'll know to extrapolate as the other? Tzricha, we need them both. Why? If you only taught it regarding one courtyard to another, when 66b2, Bahakar Shmuel, there Shmuel said that you cannot, that one courtyard, the people of one courtyard cannot relinquish their rights to the other courtyard, mishum daha tashmishta lechud v'ha tashmish lechud, because this chatzar has independent function. In other words, they each have usage of their own courtyard. So it's not so necessary for them to be able to combine together. And therefore we say, too bad, they didn't combine together. You don't have to do this whole relinquishing rights loophole. It's not necessary. They all have their own courtyard in front of them. But in the case of a ruin, granted, it's all bumpy and it's not the most easy to use space. But the bottom line is that it's the only space they have. They live in a ruins. Maybe he would agree to Rav Yochanan. In that case, you would be able to do a bittul. And therefore we need Rav Shmuel to say, no, I will not do a bittul in that case. And if you only had the second disagreement, maybe Rav Yochanan only said you relinquish rights in that case, in the case of the churba, because they all share a space. But in the case of two courtyards side by side, maybe he would agree to Shmuel that there you cannot relinquish rights because at the end of the day they each have their own chatzar. Tzricha, you therefore need them both. Amar Abaye. So now we go back to Shmuel's statement. Again, all we have directly from Shmuel was stating that you can't do bittul rishus from one courtyard to another. But as we remember, I hope you remember, Abaye limited that. Let's read it again. And here we're going to see it again. Amar Abaye, Hadar Shmuel bittul rishus b'chatz chatzar. That Shmuel said you can't do bittul rishus, relinquishing of rights from one courtyard to another. That's only said when there are two courtyards side by side and there's a doorway between them. But if there are two courtyards, one inner, one outer, since those in the inner one, since they didn't make an error with these people, and they didn't make their own error, they're going to cause these people out here to be not able to be carried, there you do allow the people in the outer one to go and do bittul, to relinquish their rights to those in the outer one. Rava disagrees. Rava Amar, even in the case of two courtyards, one behind the other, generally speaking, they will not be able to bittul, as we're about to see. He says sometimes they can relinquish, and sometimes they may not relinquish. And now he's going to go into the examples of when they could and when they cannot. Okay, so he says like this. Kate said, what are the cases? Nasnu Eruvin bichitzon. If they place the joint eruv in a house in the outer chatzar, right? The inner courtyard, outer courtyard. They're trying to join all together. If they put the joint eruv in the outer chatzar, v'shachach echad bein min apnimius uvein min achitzon v'lo eruv, and someone, whether from the inside or from the outside, forgot and did not join the eruv, shtein asuros, everyone is going to be prohibited from carrying in this space. Nasnu Eruvin b'pnimis, if they put the eruv in the inner courtyard, v'shachach echad min apnimis lo eruv, and someone from the inner courtyard forgot and not joining the eruv, shtein asuros, everyone's aser. However, shachach echad min achitzon v'lo eruv, if someone from the outer chatzar forgot and not joined the eruv, pnimis muteres, the people on the inner one are permitted, v'chitzon asur, the people on the outside are restricted. Okay, so before we go further and analyze this, let's just understand what is relinquishing rights. Relinquishing rights means that I'm giving everyone else here the opportunity to use this. So when I relinquish rights, I have to go ahead, let's say it's me and you, or we live in one chatzar, and I forgot to make an eruv, so I could go ahead and relinquish my rights to this courtyard. Now it's like one person's there. Let's say you have 5 people living in this one courtyard. I go ahead and I relinquish my rights to all the 5 people, and now I don't have my own identity, but the relinquishing of rights has to go to everyone. I have to relinquish my rights to everyone there. Okay, let's keep that in mind, because in our case it gets more complicated. In our case, it's not just one courtyard where that would be fine. It's 2 courtyards. Okay, it's this courtyard and it's that courtyard that's behind it, right? And there, when I'm relinquishing rights, I'm trying to relinquish rights to those in my immediate vicinity and in the next one. But let's keep in mind, Rava holds that there is a limitation. He holds that Shmuel actually does not typically allow relinquishing rights from one courtyard to another, even when it causes problems, even when it causes a limitation that people cannot carry, it's still going to be usher to do so. There's going to be one case which is going to be allowed. So let's now go into the details, and hopefully this will make sense. Nasnu Eruvin bichitzon. If they place the joint eruv in the outer courtyard, and someone from the inside or from the outside forgot and did not join the eruv, that's case 1 and 2. Everyone's usher. Why? Because hai bar pnimis leman nivato. Let's say one of the people in the inner courtyard forgot to make an eruv. Now he has to relinquish his rights to everyone. Okay, so levato v'nei pnimis. So if he was going to go ahead and relinquish his rights to those in his own courtyard, that's fine. But the problem is leisa leruvayo gabayu. There's no eruv there. It's not going to actually help, right? If he says, "I relinquish my rights to all of you," okay, and now we're all like one entity, we could share space. Great. But if there's no Eruv, you can't carry. So that's not going to help us. So levat l'nei chitzona, so you want to tell the guy on the inside is going to do bittul to the people outside? You can't do relinquishing of rights from one courtyard to another courtyard. So you're done in that case, okay? So then we go to the second case where a member of the outer chutzner forgot to contribute to the Eruv, okay? So hai bar chitzon l'manavatel. So in that case, who should that guy in the outer chutzner relinquish his rights to? Levat l'nei chitzona. So if he just goes ahead and relinquishes his rights to the people in the outer courtyard, okay, so on the one hand, it's good because they have the Eruv there. The problem is Ika Pnimis to Asr Alahu. So there's still the inner courtyard, which restricts them because since the people in the inner courtyard are not able to, he didn't do bittul to them, so therefore they can't carry, and therefore they're passing through the outer courtyard, and everyone's going to be Asr still. No one can carry. Levat L'nei Pnimis, if he's going to relinquish his rights to the members of the inner courtyard, he can't do that because he can't go from one courtyard to the other. Okay, so let's go to case number 3. Let's say they place the Eruv in the inner chutzner, and someone from the inner courtyard did not join them in Eruv. Shnei Masur is all Asr. So why? Because Hai Bar Pnimis L'manavatzel. Who should the people in the inner courtyard go ahead and join the Eruv, relinquish his rights to? Levat L'nei Pnimis, if he goes ahead and relinquishes his rights to those in the inner courtyard, that's nice, but there's still the outer courtyard, which restricts them, because at the end of the day, there is the outer courtyard, which they have to pass through, and the people in the outer courtyard don't have an Eruv. Okay, so Levat L'nei Chitzona, let's say he goes ahead and relinquishes his rights to those in the outer courtyard. There's no relinquishment of rights between one courtyard and another. So now we go to the final case, which is the one case that, according to Rava, Shmuel would allow. Shachach echad min hachitzon v'lo Eruv. If someone from the outer courtyard forgot and not joining the Eruv, vadai pnimis muteres. In that case, the inner courtyard is allowed. The inner courtyard where the Eruv is, it is allowed. Why? Da'achta dasha u'mishtamsha. Because they can figuratively close their entrance and use it. V'chitzoni asura, and the outer courtyard would be restricted because there's no Eruv there. What does that mean? What that means is as follows. People in the inner courtyard, they did everything right. They all joined the Eruv, and they put the Eruv in their place. Someone in the outer courtyard did not do something right. They forgot to make an Eruv. So, again, the people in the outer courtyard can't do bittul to those in the inner courtyard because that's from courtyard to courtyard. But over here, it's a little different because the people in the inner courtyard could make like an imaginary, they could say, we don't want there to be connection between us anymore. We want to make a wall between us. That doorway, let's treat it as like a wall. Don't pass it, I won't pass it, you won't pass it. And it's two separate entities because they really are two separate courtyards. So in that case, the people in the inner courtyard, they are allowed to travel one to another. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. 1 second. So the people in the inner courtyard, they could say to the people in the outer courtyard, listen, we tried to make a merger together. The problem is that because of your, whatever, absent-mindedness, whatever it was, you forgot to make an Eruv over here, okay? So because of that, we're going to say, listen, we don't really want to, we only want to be connected to you insofar as it's not going to harm us. But over here, since it's harming us, we'd be able to theoretically put this wall up, and therefore, you are able, the rabbis say, in that case, since the people on the inside could go ahead and theoretically close that door, and cause them to be completely separate, and therefore have no issues, they could therefore, the people in the outer courtyard, go ahead and do bittul, inter chatzeros, from one chatzer to the other chatzer. In case number 3, which was very similar to this case, this can't happen, because there, in that case, although the Eruv is in the inner courtyard, and they theoretically put that wall up, the person who forgot is someone in the inner courtyard. And there we say, too bad. If someone in your courtyard messed up, then there we don't have that same dispensation. It's only in a case where the mistake was made by someone who has nothing to do with you. Really, if you just close that door, everything will be totally fine. In that case, we say the people from the outer one are allowed to be mavatel, and therefore that allows the people in the inner one to go and walk through the outer one. But in the case where, and the outer one would still be forbidden, right? And again, in case number 4, I just want to be very clear. The people in the outer one do bittul to the people in the inner one, enabling the people in the inner one to walk through. But the people in the outer one, since someone there did not make an Eruv, they're all usher. They're all usher, right? Because again, there's an imaginary wall, and there's bittul taking place. So they're all usher, but the people in the inside are allowed to use it. But in the third case, where the Eruv was in the inner courtyard, and it was someone in the inner courtyard who forgot to join the Eruv, there we say you are not allowed to. There we say you can't do this. This idea of putting up the wall and all that, because at the end of the day, the people in the inner courtyard are at fault, and therefore it does not work. Have a great day. Take care.